We don't often associate the comedians, the entertainers, or the class clowns of our world with our historical greats. Comedians like Dave Chappelle, George Carlin, or Louis C.K. don't often find themselves paired with our more highly regarded figures of history like El Greco of the Catholic Church, who was a famous artist, or musicians like Mozart. Humor is very rarely taken seriously because its contents are very rarely serious. Today, however, we're seeing a shift in this paradigm, as satirical commentary, like The Onion, or political parody as we see in SNL, is being highlighted by our mainstream media and by our peers on a regular basis. A common view is that in order to understand and to cope with some of the horrific truths of our world at large, we first need to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Oh my God. I think America is racist.
Oh my God. I remember my great-grandfather told me something like that. But he was like a slave or something.
In fact, those names that I mentioned of history's well-regarded contributors to society, they all had their own hilarious quirks and jokes that we don't hear about very often. El Greco was commissioned to paint for the Catholic Church, but he was told he wasn't allowed to include dogs, which he loved and he would often include within his own personal works. As a workaround, he would simply hide them in his images in the backgrounds or the clouds. Now it's just a fun Where's Waldo game for pretentious art collectors. And finally, Mozart. Classical musician Mozart. The man whose musical genius is so highly regarded by the snootiest of the snoods as well as the lowliest and purest among musical aficionados. He once wrote a hysterical 6-voice canon in the key of B-flat titled Leck mich im Arsch, or translated literally from German, lick me in the arse. I mean, come on, isn't it so comforting to know that even Mozart never lost touch with his inner child? I'm Bryce Hagan for The Beacon Bolt, and this video is about comedy's philosophical reputation as it was, and how we should learn to see it today. The philosophical discourse today is tied very tightly to the world of academia. Right at the outset, someone looking into what job fields an undergraduate degree in philosophy could land them in, they're not going to find many beyond that of a teacher of philosophy. Truthfully, philosophy shouldn't be limited or restricted to the world of academia at all. And when done in practice, I don't even think it can be, at least effectively. Socrates, the father of philosophy, reportedly practiced and came to understand all that he knew in and amongst his own people through back and forth conversational dialogue, which is now referred to as the Socratic method of speech. He did so with the people of Athens, Greece, his home. After his death, one of his friends and pupils, Plato, went on to found the Platonic Academy, which many regard as the Western world's first ever higher institution of learning. This took Socrates' ideas away from the streets and the common people and instead isolated them, something that I feel gave members a feeling of exclusivity or even superiority over the lay people. Something Socrates would have found just super not cool, man. This gives the impression that academic institutions are where philosophy begins, persists, and will eventually fade away. Yet, on the contrary, philosophy has been showing its face in all sorts of mediums and platforms through the years. Only it doesn't announce its presence as such. It's just there as an unspoken talking point in our culture.
Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV.
The one platform in which I've seen the most explicitly obvious philosophical discussions is that of the stand-up comic. Don't be mistaken, I'm not trying to say that every stand-up comedian should be called a philosopher by any means. Nor am I trying to say that comedy is the most effective way to express philosophical thought. Rather, I think that humor and comedy should be brought more heavily into legitimate philosophical discussion, as up until these past few years, it's been all but ignored. Hobbes didn't even like humor. He thought it was evil. Crap. Okay, wrong Hobbes. This Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes. You know what, he looks boring, let's just skip him. John Morial, Doctor of Philosophy, has written extensively on the subject of philosophy and humor, and he puts it like this. Until the 20th century, the vast majority of philosophical comments on laughter and humor focus on scornful or mocking laughter, or on laughter that overpowers people, rather than on comedy, wit, or joking. Plato, the most influential critic of laughter, treated it as an emotion that overrides rational self-control. Later on, in 1875, George Vasey published the philosophy of laughter and smiling, which makes the honest suggestion that laughter is an unnatural habit brought upon us by our parents relentlessly tickling us during our infancy. Oh, and it can kill us, all right? Or cut off our blood circulation. Anyway, today these theories have been disproven and dismissed several times over, but updated theories took a while to replace the old. This is where the incongruity theory of humor plays its part. Put simply, this term describes humorous amusement as a reaction or response to something that starkly defies one's expectations or breaks an anticipated mental pattern. Puns are a good example in the classic, "Haha, you are very punny." One would expect the word funny, but instead they're slapped in the face with punny.
I believe in the zodiac. Yeah, I do. I'm a Leo. I love Titanic. There's something a little bit morbidly ironic. My grandmother, she was a Cancer, and she was actually killed by a giant crab.
Okay, hold on, that's like a lot of colors, so let's break this down. Stand-up comedians have used since the dawn of time the same joke formula. There's a setup. This is meant to introduce a topic, usually one that we would find familiar or relatable. Immediately, our brain is working ahead of us, analyzing our memories and experiences in order for it to brace itself for whatever's coming next. It's automatically setting expectations. If we were anywhere other than a comedy club, it would probably be doing a really excellent job. Next is the build-up, a supporting step that's not really necessary, but is used when a comedian wants to offer supporting facts, background information, or clarification, and even, as we see here, just blunt self-confirmation, as if to tell our brains, don't worry, whatever you're expecting is exactly what you're gonna get. You can trust me, okay? Then comes the punchline where he slaps our brain in the face, like, psych, why would you trust me? Bo Burnham has shown incredible skill in his mastery of the incongruity theory through his constant inclusion of misdirection and wordplay on stage.
Which is that all of us deal with language all the time. I thought it might be nice today for me to come to you with some of my language complaints. People, the only term limits I'm interested in would be to limit some of the terms used by politicians. They speak, of course, with great caution because they must take care not to actually say anything. But when I do, I will advise you. They don't tell, they advise. I advised him that I had made a judgment. Thus far, he hasn't responded. They don't answer, they respond. He hasn't responded to my initiative. An initiative is an idea that isn't going anywhere.
George Carlin offers huge masses of people his philosophical inquiries and insights, and he does so in a way that is emotionally engaging and hilarious. It defies our expectations, yet at times it asks us to think for ourselves.
What's the show about? What do you think, industrial piping? Close. Stay out of it.
Using comedy as a platform for philosophical discussion is smart because it doesn't restrict itself to needlessly complex language, like what you would find in today's academic writing. An article from The Atlantic criticizes this use of language, saying academics play an elitist game with their words, and that some believe academic writing has continued in this fashion because without the complicated and obscure vernacular, writers wouldn't appear to meet the same unrealistic expectations set by those who exploit its uses, regardless of the quality of the content. Carlin, amongst others, can be seen making an effort not only to raise the spirits of an audience of common people, but to simultaneously engage them in a philosophical dialogue. So here's what we're left with. Is it within the bounds of a comedian, a stage actor, or an entertainer to engage these types of conversations and dialogue? On one hand, they're raising awareness to things they believe to be important, and they make it relevant to their acts. On the other, how often are they doing so from a place of true understanding? Is it wrong for entertainers to represent themselves as a philosopher when they haven't so much as graduated from high school in some cases? Will audiences start confusing some of the more sarcastic or whimsical jokes with the real messages of the performer, missing their central takeaway? Just some food for thought. If you have something to say on the matter, feel free to comment below. And by the way, the song you've been hearing in the background of this video is by a friend of mine, Clay Hollie. Be sure to check out more of his work. I put some links in the description. Thank you so much for watching.